I learned the terrifying truth about sleeping in the dark. And it involved something unseen. I never should have opened that door. My heart pounded as I stood there, the faint glow from my hallway light the only guide in the oppressive darkness that seeped from the room beyond. Something about it chilled me, like frost creeping under my skin. I was just a regular person going to bed, drifting into dreams until that door, that sinister door, loomed in front of me. That I remember the quiet nights, the predictable sounds of my home, the hum of the fridge, the soft ticking of the clock. But it was different now. The air grew heavy, thick with a creeping dread. I could taste the fear on my tongue. It had a metallic tang, like blood. The feeling prickled at the back of my neck, urging me to turn back. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, barely there but absolute in their insistence. It felt like eyes were watching, moving just out of sight. I glanced at the door again. It beckoned. A whisper of curiosity mingled with terror. I could hear its soft creaking of wood, the sound of something shifting behind it. What was in there? Was it waiting for me? Every second I stood frozen. The darkness seemed to grow bolder. I backed away but stumbled. My foot caught on the edge of the carpet. Panic surged through me, thumping in my chest like a war drum. The breath caught in my throat. I could hear a low rustling inside. A sigh perhaps, or a call. It sounded like my name. Footsteps thudded in an irregular tempo, the sort that made my skin crawl. I barely breathed, my pulse racing louder than ever. This isn't just my imagination. I could feel it there. An unseen presence, looming close, filled with malevolent energy. Everything felt so still, yet electric, like a storm about to break. In one frantic motion, I turned the doorknob, my hands slick with sweat. What had I done? I pushed the door open and it creaked painfully, releasing a wave of stale, cold air that smelled of dampness. What lay beyond was a void, a swirling mass of darkness that swallowed the light. I stepped inside, heart hammering, and the door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, but no sound escaped my lips. The darkness enveloped me, pressing in on all sides. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness swallowed me whole, an inky abyss where sound vanished, and the slightest movement echoed like a clap of thunder. I was caught in a suffocating vacuum, every breath a labor, the air thick and stale. I tried to recall the mundane comforts of my world outside that door, the warmth of sunlight filtering through the curtains, the laughter of friends, but all that was left now was this unsettling isolation. Panic clawed at my throat, and I reached out blindly, sliding my fingers along the rough wall, pushing through the disorienting blackness as I stumbled deeper. Each heartbeat drummed in my ears, a steady reminder that I was still alive, still human. And yet, something in this darkness felt ancient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to my existence. That queer rustling had stopped, replaced by an overwhelming silence punctuated only by my ragged breaths. Then, a soft whisper coiled around me. You shouldn't be here. It was barely audible, like a breeze weaving through the leaves of a dense forest. I froze, my skin prickling. How could a whisper feel so tangible? I turned slowly, squinting into the void, searching for the source of the voice. All I could see was an abyss that extended infinitely, swallowing any light that dared penetrate its depths. Was I hearing things, or had something truly spoken? The air felt thicker then, oppressive, as though it were alive and hungrily wrapping around me. That a flicker of movement brushed past me, too quick for my eyes to catch. I gasped and backed away, colliding with the wall. Something laughed softly, a sound that crawled under my skin and ignited a primal fear deep within. I brought my hands up to shield myself, pleading with the darkness to show me mercy. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, shocking me with a biting chill that seeped into my bones. My breath fogged in the air, and a sense of dread raced through me as frantic thoughts collided in my mind. I needed to find my way out. I turned and felt for the door behind me, desperately feeling for the familiar wooden frame, but it was gone. As I reached further, I felt fingers brush against my hand, cold, bony fingers that gripped me tightly, sending electric shockwaves through my skin. My heart raced as I yanked my hand back, every muscle tensed and poised to flee, yet I could not escape. The whisper returned, now closer, an insidious tone that seemed to resonate from all around me. "You'll never leave." Then, a shattering sound echoed. It was the sound of breaking glass, like a window shattered not too far away. I turned my head, instinctively trying to locate the source, and that's when I noticed them. The shadows were no longer merely shapes. They shifted, morphing into twisted figures, their outlines jagged and sharp like fractured mirrors. I was being watched, 1,000 blackened eyes on me, each one harboring their own wicked curiosity. "Help me," I begged, though I knew it was futile. The shadows laughed, a chorus of malicious glee. I stumbled backward, awareness fading beneath their weight, pressing down on me until I thought I might collapse. I felt the ground shift, a quivering quake beneath my feet, as if the very foundation of this dark realm was alive, wanting to consume me whole. As I scrambled, searching desperately for a route, the figures began to coalesce, pressing closer, their breath foul and cold against my skin. I lurched in a different direction, my mind racing, when suddenly, a hand shot out from the shadows, gripping my ankle and dragging me down. The void opened beneath me, a swirling pit of despair, and with one last gasp, I was pulled into it. The last thing I heard was that dreadful whisper echoing in my ears, "Now you're ours forever," before the darkness enveloped me completely. I fell through an eternity of silencia, a pit with no bottom, only to crash, breathless, into a luminous expanse that was aglow with cold, ghostly light. My body ached, yet all I felt was confusion, fear, and the unmistakable sense that I was not alone. As I scrambled to rise, I saw them again, longing faces trapped behind shimmering veils, their expressions twisted in silent screams. They reached through the light, fingers stretching toward me with hopeless yearning. I turned around, trembling, knowing I was on the precipice of something far worse than I ever anticipated. With the breath caught in my throat, I looked up just as the shadows began to consolidate, a yawning darkness swallowing the light behind me, forcing me back toward that familiar door I thought I had escaped. But this time, it was opening wide, revealing a horrifying truth that froze the blood in my veins, a truth I was never meant to uncover. Echoes of my name rang hollow in my ears as the door yawned wider, the void beckoning with a sinister allure. I had come to learn the truth of darkness, but I wasn't sure how much I could endure before it consumed me, body and soul. The figures moved closer, their whispers rising in intensity, promising secrets and terrors yet to unfold. And then, with a jarring thud, I stumbled back, the shadows enveloping me, and a chilling realization hit me. I wasn't merely a visitor here. I had become the prey. The whispers grew louder, clawing at my mind, stirring memories long buried. The voices of people I had once known wrapped around me like a serpent, suffocating and sweet. "Join us," they murmured, each word dripping with a yearning that felt almost familiar. I shook my head violently, trying to drown them out, but it was impossible. The light behind me faltered, flickering like a dying star, and I was left facing the shadows, hungry, twisted remnants of something that had once been human. I could feel their breath against my skin, cold and rancid, and as they inched closer, it struck me these were not mere figments of my imagination. They were souls, echoing the torment of their own existence, and they were desperate for release. From the glint of despair in their hollow eyes, I realized that they recognized me. The shadows swept in, and I stumbled, fighting against an unseen force that sought to pull me into their web. "Let me go!" I screamed, treading against the current of despair that enveloped me, but it was like swimming against the tide of the midnight sea. "You belong with us," came a voice so close I could almost feel the breath on my ear, hot and rotten. Panic surged. I needed to escape. I had to escape. I turned my back on the figures thrumming with a dark energy, clasping my hands over my ears as if I could block the sorrowful cacophony. I stumbled away, propelled by fear as I stumbled through the luminous maze. Strangely, I began to feel heavy, their sorrow pooling in my chest, a weight that threatened to crush me beneath its intensity. Suddenly, the light flickered again, a warning pulse that sent a shiver through the air. The figures inched ever closer, their features flickering between agony and rage, shadows twisting into monstrous shapes under the fractured glow. I realized I had to find a way out. This was not just a realm of darkness. It was a prison, a purgatory for the forsaken. Glimpses of twisted hallways stretched out before me. Each path shimmered with a deceptive beauty, glittering like millions of stars trapped in glass. Yet they all seemed to converge toward the very door I had run from. My heart pounded as I sprinted toward a corridor swathed in dim light, hoping to outrun the looming shadows. With every step, tendrils of darkness lashed out, trying to catch me in their grasp. I gasped, narrowly dodging an unseen force that lashed through the air, snaking around my waist before I wriggled free. "Where are you going?" The voices mocked, blending seamlessly into one. "You cannot escape your fate." Just as I rounded a corner, I stopped short. Before me lay an ancient wooden door, its surface marked by deep gnarls and scars, but it was ajar. A sudden rush of hope ignited inside me. The truth behind the door sang sweetly to mean escape from the tortured faces that clawed for my attention. I reached for it, but a chilling draft fluttered past my ears, warning me to turn back. Ignoring the terror pooling in my gut, I pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, revealing a room filled with mirrors that reflected not just my terrified face, but also those of the lost souls that clung to each surface. They tormented me with their agony, crafting a gallery of forgotten lives, a torturous reminder of what awaited me if I succumbed to despair. I recoiled, my senses overwhelmed. Each mirror seemed alive, and I realized they were extensions of the very darkness that held me captive. But then, in the corners of the reflections, I saw something shift, a creeping shadow, diverging from the others, lurking behind me. A whisper, sharper than before, crawled up my spine. "I am here, watching you." I turned, dread pooling in my stomach, my heart racing. The shadow grew bolder, emerging from the light and stretching its form into a figure, tall and gaunt, its eyes gleaming like hollow lanterns deep in the forest. And with a voice that rumbled like thunder, it boomed, "You cannot flee your destiny." There was a chasm of darkness that enveloped my vision, swallowing everything but the piercing gaze of the figure before me. And as I stood frozen, grappling with the weight of the realization that this might be the apex of my horror, the lights began to flicker more violently, swirling as if a storm was brewing within them. Then I knew I was not merely facing the whispers of the damned. I was being summoned by something worse. From deep within the void behind the figures, a new entity was beginning to awaken. Its presence sent waves of icy terror rushing through my veins as I took a step back, my heart thrumming with the cries of the souls longing for freedom. "Where will you run, child?" it taunted, the shadows thickening around me, swallowing what little light remained. "This is home now." And just before I succumbed to the encroaching darkness, the ground trembled beneath me, and the very fabric of this sinister realm began to unravel. I gasped, my breath hitching in my throat. With nothing but a single flicker of thought, a desperate wish for escape, I lunged toward the opening of the mysterious door. But time had run out, and as I crossed the threshold, the shadows surged forward in a crescendo of fury. The door slammed shut behind me with a violent reverberation, cutting me off from whatever horror awaited beyond. Gasping for breath, I pressed my back against the door. For a fleeting moment, I relaxed, thinking I had narrowly escaped. But then, a heartbeat later, the door groaned ominously, and the shadows began to slip beneath it, coiling up my legs, seeking purchase, while a terrible laughter erupted all around me. The real fear flooded my senses, for there in the darkness, I realized, escape was merely an illusion, and the true nightmare was only beginning. Struggling against the suffocating grip of despair, I steadied myself as the shadows writhed hungrily around my feet. Panic surged anew, and I tried to remember what I had just escaped. But the horrifying laughter echoed in my ears, drowning out all rational thought. The shadows whispered to me in a sibilant chorus, urging me to let go, to succumb to the depths of their eternal embrace. "Please, no," I shouted, my voice cracking under the pressure of an unseen weight threatening to pull me back into that wretched place. It felt as though my very essence was being siphoned away, absorbed by the darkness that writhed like a living creature across the floor. My eyes darted around the dimly lit room, searching for anything that would anchor me to reality. Broken furniture lay strewn about, illuminated only by the waning light of a flickering bulb above, casting elongated shadows that danced menacingly against the walls. It was as if the darkness was alive, undulating rhythmically, waiting for the inevitable moment when I would falter. I could feel their cold, hollow eyes on me still, the lost souls who had clamored for release now circling my mind, their voices a haunting symphony that tugged at my sanity. "You belong with us," they echoed, driving daggers of cold dread into my heart. "You can't escape what you are." Taking a deep breath, I pushed myself away from the door, forcing my shaking limbs to move. I needed to find a way out of this nightmare before the darkness consumed me entirely. My only option was to explore the room, to find a means of escape, a hidden passage, a miraculous doorway, anything that could pull me from this living hell. With hesitant steps, I crossed the room, navigating between the remnants of forgotten lives. The air was thick with their despair, and I felt my lungs constricting with every frantic breath. I focused on the towering mirrors lining the walls, oddly untouched by the malevolence that crawled along the floor. There had to be something more within their reflective depths. I approached the nearest mirror, breathless as my reflection flickered uncertainly. It glared back at me with wide, terrified eyes, but there was something else lurking within a swirl of shadow that seemed to merge with my being, eager to consume me whole. For a fleeting moment, I thought I glimpsed a face twisted in silent agony, morphing rapidly before my horrified gaze. Suddenly, the air shifted. The mirror rippled like water, drawing me in, the glass vibrating with an otherworldly hum. I pressed my fingers against the surface, a compelling force urging me to step through. "Find the truth," a voice murmured, smooth and tantalizing. It felt like an invitation wrapped in honeyed death, promising insight as much as it threatened oblivion. I teetered on the edge of desperation and misgiving, contemplating the depths of the reflection I saw before me. But behind me, the laughter escalated, an insidious crescendo that shook the very foundation of my sanity. The shadows darkened, elongating towards me, hissing with fury. They wanted me back, nowhere to run. They taunted in horrid unison. Heart pounding like a war drum, I shoved my foot forward, kindling the flicker of hope that this might indeed be an escape route. The moment my foot made contact, the mirrored surface rippled violently as if reacting to my very presence, and I was engulfed by the soft embrace of the dark liquid. Sinking into the depths, I was hurled through time and space, darkness swirling around me as my breath wafted outwards, lost to the shadows. The sensation was disorienting, spinning me like a marionette caught in a tempest. And then, without warning, I tumbled forward, crashing onto a cold stone floor. Gasping, I rolled onto my stomach, pressing my palms against the ground. I was in another room, one that felt reminiscent of a dungeon, the air dank and suffocating. My heart raced as I pushed myself upright, but the world was eerily still, a profound silence saturating the atmosphere. I scanned the room, the walls adorned with grotesque carvings, faces, twisted in expressions of dread and anguish. It dawned on me that I was not alone. A presence lurked just beyond my field of vision. As I turned towards the corner, something stirred beneath a thin veil of darkness. A figure, immobile yet pulsating with a faint energy that sent chills shooting down my spine. I felt its eyes upon me, tense, unblinking. Fear gripped me, tightening its hold as I realized my heartbeat matched the rhythm of its own, as if we were bound by some sinister tether. "Why do you run?" it rasped, voice ragged like a broken record. "You cannot escape what you desire most." My mind raced, fighting the urge to succumb to panic. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, a mix of defiance and quaking fear lacing my voice. But the shadow creature only tilted its head, its form shifting almost languidly. As it took a step into the light, I recoiled in horror. Its skin seemed to melt away, revealing a flickering void where its features should be. The sensation of being watched intensified, wrapping around me like a noose. Suddenly, as if drawing strength from my terror, it lunged forward, the dark mass swallowing the light around me. I staggered back, crawling away as the room began to tremble, the very foundation warping beneath me. "Accept it. Become one with us," it screeched, the sound resonating with a cacophony of tortured souls. Despair clawed at my chest, but instinct propelled me forward. If I could escape this entity, perhaps I could find a way back, a way to escape this nightmare totally. My fingers scrabbled against the cold ground, seeking a crack, a path, anything. Then I heard it, the distant sound of muffled cries interlacing with my own racing heart. It came from the corner of the room, where the shadows converged, pooling like ink from a spilled vial. With one last surge of desperation, I dashed toward the cries. The shadow entity lunged again, the air crackling with dark energy as I reached for the source of the sound, not knowing if it was salvation or doom. But time was running out. Just as I grasped for hope, I felt the grip of darkness clutch around my throat, tightening with a vice-like hold, and I gasped in shock as the room collapsed into a swirling abyss. And then, just as I thought I would plunge into the eternal void, the world cracked open into blinding light, severing the darkness into fragments. For a moment, I forgot the entity, lost in the brilliance that engulfed me. But then it hit me with the force of a freight train, a searing pain coursing through my being as the shadows clawed their way back up my legs, and I was again swallowed by their wicked embrace. "Did you think you could ever truly leave?" they whispered, rising over me like a tidal wave. "This is only the beginning." The room dissolved into chaos, fragments of my last moments spinning in a vortex of light and shadows before crashing against the edges of my mind. I fought back the urge to succumb to the darkness that enveloped me once again, the bitter chill sinking into my bones. Horror clawed at the corners of my consciousness, a recognition of that familiar laughter, that unspeakable will of the void. As I pushed against the shadows gripping my limbs, those echoes clicked into place, a nightmarish recognition. They weren't just whispers. They were voices of the lost, souls marred by their encounters with the nocturnal recesses of this twisted reality. I tasted their despair, the bitterness mingling with my own in unholy communion of fear. Through sheer will, I broke free, my heart pounding in rhythm with the fear that filled the space around me. The room stretched and twisted, altering itself, and as I steadied my breath, the darkness swirled more vigorously, taking shape. Before me, formed from the murky shadows, stood a figure. This one was different. No longer a melting, monstrous visage, but rather, a grotesquely beautiful woman. Her features glowed with an ethereal light, but underneath the facade lay the malevolence I had felt prior. A siren blended with the wickedness of the dark. "Do you see it?" she crooned. "What they hide from you? Your desires? If you wish to understand it, you must embrace the darkness and accept me." Frantically looking around, I searched for a door or window, for an escape route. But with my back to the barren wall, all I faced was that haunting presence, her radiant smile that belied a voracious hunger for my soul. "No, you're lying. You want to consume me," I shouted, but the stubborn desperation in her eyes only deepened as she approached. "Consume? Oh, darling, I simply want to free you." Her voice twinkled like shattered glass, luring me closer. I felt diminished for every word she spoke, as though her shadow was merging with mine. "All you need to do is surrender. Everyone craves the thrill of darkness," she coaxed, a knowing smile painted on her lips. Images flashed through my mind, whispers of laughter during midnight games, the thrilling stories told around campfires that danced close to the edge of fear. The veil between horror and curiosity blurred in those memories, the thrill of approaching the abyss. But what I craved then felt like an anomaly in the face of this unending dread. "Step into the dark with me and you'll see." Her hand reached out, delicate and inviting. The shadows surrounding her rolled with gentle anticipation, as if the air thickened with an unseen force, grasping at the edges of my psyche. I don't want this. Leave me alone. My voice trembled, rising above the cacophony. I turned to run, but the room twisted, my escape thwarted as the shadows congealed into forms that mocked my intentions. Suddenly, something cold and slimy slid against my ankle. It slithered like a serpent, wrapping itself around my leg and yanking fiercely. I cried out, my voice swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The laugh of the woman warped, becoming an echoing mockery that vibrated through the air. Join us! Join us! The voices rose in pitch, shrill and desperate together, drowning me in their collective sorrow. I struggled, my breaths becoming shallow, panic consuming my thoughts as I fell to the ground, thrashing against the encroaching mass. In that instant, I felt something else beneath the Aurora pulse. Beneath all the whispers and laughter, there was a rhythm of desperation, the unfurling of something that craved release as much as I did. Desperation surged within me as I clawed against the flooring, searching for any object to anchor myself back to reality. I felt cold stone beneath my fingertips as I pushed my body up, my gaze catching on what seemed to be an ornate chest, barely shimmering in the gloom at the far end of the room. Instinct drove me. I lunged, ignoring the agony of the shadows that clawed at my ankles, fastening like chains with every hurried step towards the chest. My hand wrapped around the cold metal latch, but just as I pulled it open, the siren's laughter surged anew, blinding me with dread. You don't know what's inside, she screeched, her beauty warping as her true form flickered beneath the glow. You mustn't. But it was too late. The moment the chest creaked open, the very fabric of the room shook violently, shadows convulsing and howling gone ear-shattering cacophony of rage. From within the chest, a blinding light erupted, rippling through the air, illuminating the space with ethereal intensity. And then, amidst the chaos, the shrieks of tormented souls blended with the air, forcing their way past my defenses. I watched in horror as shapes began to twist from the shadows, phantoms spiraling away from the darkness, shapes that wore the faces of those I once loved. Mouths open in silent screams, their features twisted with fear and longing. Oh, I staggered back as they flooded toward me, reaching out with spectral arms, their eyes gleaming with a terrifying need. Help us, they cried out, voices merging into a single sorrowful plea. I stood paralyzed, caught in the vice grip of despair as they neared, these phantoms yearning for release. The sinuous darkness curling around my stomach, tightening, pulling me closer, and then, just as the light began to consume them, the shadows surged forward, swallowing both the ethereal glow and the lost souls, entwining them in a grotesque dance. The last thing I saw before the light flickered out was the figure of the siren, now fully formed but grotesquely contorted. Her mouth stretched wide in a horrendous grin, and in the blink of an eye, everything fell into pitch-black silence. It was then that I felt a cold breath against my ear. Now, you are ours, and with that, everything went dark. The void swallowed my screams whole. Panic clawed at my throat as shadows closed in around me, curling like serpents, their silent wails filling the void with a suffocating dread. A deep, pulsating silence hung in the air, thick enough to drown in, wrapping tightly around my chest until I could scarcely breathe. A sensation, at once familiar and alien, washed over me, tugging at my very essence, presenting a temptation that drew me deeper into the void. Help us! Help us! Echoed the tortured pleas, but now they were softer, like the whispers of children lulled to sleep, nurtured in the womb of nightmares. With each flicker of my consciousness, I felt my own sense of self erode, dropping away like ashes in the wind. Was I truly here anymore? Or was I just a figment, a ghostly presence caught between realities? Before I could fully succumb, a shimmer burst forth from the darkness, a flickering glow emanating from the chest that still lay ajar. The tendrils of shadow slithered back, as though woven together by an unseen hand, reluctant to yield to the light. My heart raced anew, the pulsing warmth of the chest seemed to call to me. But the last scene burned in my mind, the faces of my loved ones, twisted in torment. I staggered backward, Yet curiosity spurred me forward once more. The darkness now writhed and roared, an orchestra of anguish playing an unsettling symphony in the recess of my terrified heart. As I plucked up the courage to approach the chest again, the air crackled with an energy I dared not comprehend. Suddenly, there was movement in the periphery of my Visiona. Shadow darted past with unnatural swiftness, flickering out before I could focus on its form. The hairs on my neck stood at attention, instinctively warning me that I was not alone. A frigid chill skated over my skin, like ice water coursing through my veins, and an unseen weight pressed down onto my shoulders, dragging me back toward the depths of despair. I turned, compelled by a mixture of terror and an almost morbid curiosity. As I faced the shifting darkness, I felt it coalesce, manifesting into something that resembled a being. Its eyes glinted with malice, tiny pinpricks of light igniting the surrounding shadows, and I caught its brea, the fetid mix of decay and whispers from the abyss, taunting me with the remnants of long-forgotten souls. The voice came through the shadows, guttural and drenched in disdain. "You would dare to seek the light amidst the dark?" It laughed, a cacophony of thousands. "Do you think you're strong enough to face the truth buried deep within? You belong to us, know it is imprinted in your very being." I clutched my temples, trying to piece together the disarray in my mind. "You don't own me," I shouted into the thick shadow, though the quiver in my voice betrayed me. The darkness undulated, pulsating in vicious laughter. "Ah, but that's where you are mistaken," it hissed, circling around me like a hunter closing in on prey. "You see, embracing the darkness is not merely an option. It is your destiny. All those lost souls you thought you would free, they are part of this intricate tapestry of despair you now weave." And you, the creature paused, leaning closer until its icy breath brushed my face, mingling with my despair. "You are the new thread, a fraying strand weaving itself into the fabric of eternity." That I was losing the grip on my sanity. The weight of their judgment pressed down harder with every word spoken. Desperately fighting against the encroaching shadows, I belted out my defiance, louder than my heart's pulse. "I will not let you take me. I refuse to be a part of this nightmare." The creature recoiled, its laughter dissipating into a shriek that reverberated through the very foundations of reality. Light flickered dangerously again, the chest pulsing energetically as if eager to reclaim its hold over me. But then the ground trembled beneath my feet, a lower rumble that felt both animalistic and hungry. I stumbled, my foot catching on unseen roots clawing at my ankles, pulling me toward a dark pit that opened in the corner of the room. Rivulets of shadows pooled there, spilling into the void like ink spilled from a shattered vessel. The creature lunged, snapping its jaws just inches from my face. "Join me, or be lost forever," it snarled, launching itself through the air, unwinding like a serpent. With no choice, I leaped toward the chest, the need to fend off the approaching darkness consuming me. The light flickered brighter, bathing the space in an otherworldly glow. I grasped for something with Ina root, a talisman, a flicker of hope to combat the fiend closing in around me. The moment my fingers grazed the contents within, a searing heat exploded from the chest, cascading through the air as if it had been unleashed from the depths of the earth. The light surged, battling the encroaching darkness with fierce resolve. But just as clarity began breaking through the murky depth, a realization hit. What if the light itself harbored horrors just as vile as the shadows? In that heart-stopping moment of revelation, I felt the room shift violently once more, and all the voices lost, quivering, angry voices, exploded into a cacophony that drowned out even my thoughts. The walls quaked, shadows crashed over me, and the pit beneath the floor yawned wide, ready to swallow all traces of existence. As I looked into the sprawling darkness beneath, an unfathomable terror gripped me. Instead of succumbing, I gasped in defiance one last time, feeling an ancient pulse beneath my skin urging me onward. But the shadows surged, hungry and impatient, as I realized my choice was seconds away, and both light and darkness demanded their due. What would rise from the darkness, and what harrowing truth awaited me in the chest? As the room twisted into chaos, I felt the boundaries of reality dissolve. "Choose," the command boomed, shaking the room as I teetered on the precipice, suspended between both worlds. My decision was seconds away, but then something coursed through the air, a shiver of memory, a whisper of love, the laughter of those I thought I'd lost, all sewn tightly into the shadow's embrace. Before my mind could grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding, the chest exploded, and light enveloped me only to be pierced by a haunting scream. A face I recognized too well slowly materializing from the heart of the light that I couldn't breathe as I realized. It was me. The explosion of light consumed the room, and for a brief moment, it felt as if I had transcended into another realm, a safe haven bathed in warmth and hope. But as the radiance receded, revealing the jagged edges of reality once more, dread seeped back in like a dark fog. The comforting glow faded, and I was plunged into a twilight state, teetering between the illuminating essence of the chest and the oppressive shadow that encircled me. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest as I clutched my temples, desperately trying to comprehend the twisted scene before me. The echoes of laughter had vanished, replaced by a chilling silence so profound it made my skin crawl. But something was there, floating amidst the remnants of light. A shape trailed shadows that flickered in and out of focus. It was an echo of a memory, yet it seemed just as real, just as tangible. With trembling hands, I reached toward the figure. It glimmered faintly in the darkness, a silhouette of myself, my skin pale and eyes hollowed, filled with an emptiness that extended beyond the physical realm. A grotesque version of my own visage hovered in the air, twisted by some malignant force. The reflection wore the expressions of my anguish, my fears brought to life in excruciating detail. "You thought you could escape?" it whispered, its voice laced with malice. "The darkness is not just outside you. It resides within. You carry it like a shroud wherever you go to know. This isn't real," I screamed, my voice reverberating into the void. Yet it instigated no response from the ethereal reflection. It only beckoned me closer, the eyes of both it and I, potentially thousands of versions immersed in the same darkness I'd fought against. Everything I was plagued with, every anger, every hurt, and every missed opportunity rushed forward, engulfing me in an avalanche of despair. I doubled over, gasping for breath, the weight of my emotions strangling me tighter than the shadows encircling me. I was trapped in a cycle of my own making, evidence of my failure swirling like a tempest within me. Then the pit creaked again, the ground trembling in unsettling rhythm. Awash in a paralyzing fear, I turned to the void beneath, where more shadows were rising, writhing and undulating. Each flicker revealed glimpses of faces I'd loved, and faces that had been twisted with terror and lost in the abyss. They reached up as though seeking salvation, yet wrecked with the futility of hope. Their mouths opened in frantic screams that echoed in my mind. "Save us." Their voices cried, their transparency mixing with the fabric of the room as they pulled at me, urging me to leap into the depths where despair awaited. I shut my eyes against the chorus, gripping the edges of sanity with desperate strength. "No," I gasped, jolting back toward my makeshift hearth of light. But reality twisted grotesquely. Light and dark warred within me, the echoes of my other self teasing and taunting. "Which one will you choose?" it hissed, a malicious delight cracking in its tone, urging the shadows to coalesce into a single threatening mass. "Do you wish to be consumed, or to become one of us?" With a resolve teetering on delicate threads, I opened my eyes again. The flickering of light danced in and out with the shadows, an agonizing reminder of the choices I had to make. For an instant, I felt the warmth tickle the edges of my skin, promising reprieve, but it was pierced by an icy claw that raked across my back, a visceral reminder of the danger looming behind. "That's it," I screamed, directing my fury toward the dark mass that spiraled before me. "I refuse to let you manipulate my fears. You do not own me." But my voice crumbled as the shadows cackled in unison, a monstrous laugh cherishing my despair while pulling me toward them. In that instant, I realized the light had not freed me. It had outlined the horrors I was destined to confront. Raw panic flooded my veins as the darkness lunged at me, an entire constellation of hopelessness aiming to devour my essence. Desperate, I thrust my arms toward the flickering light, summoning the last vestiges of courage. As the darkness wrapped around my torso, seeping into my mind, I released a primal scream, unleashing my very being into the celestial light of blinding. Searing chaos spiraled toward the heart of terror, as if I was daring fate to do its worst. But before the light could consume me fully, I caught sight of my other self extending a hand from the depths of shadow, gnarled and twisted, yet beckoning. The pull from the shadow became stronger, and I realized that it wasn't freedom I sought, but the very thing I feared, the darkness that resided within me. As the madness of temptation swirled around the room, the laughter morphed into a bone-chilling resonance, ricocheting through the silence. My reflection hovered closer, a glimmer of perverse familiarity. "Join us, we are one," it whispered, the essence of my voice curling around the petulant edges of reality as the chest erupted anew. Then, as if time itself fractured, I felt the ground shift violently, tilting me toward a swirling amalgam of light and dark, the choice suddenly thrust upon me. Just as I was about to grasp the spectral hand reaching from the shadow, I heard the unmistakable wail of a child echoing through the chaos, a cry that shattered through the noise and fluttered into my heart. The moment hung suspended, and I realized I was both the hunter and the hunted, a fragile vessel of fear held hostage by the choices I wrestled with. Beyond the pit, the cries morphed, becoming familiar yet distant, and the shadows shrieked, trying to pull me into their unyielding embrace. In that breathless instant, I returned to the heart of the chest, a cacophony of anguish and monstrous wonder. What awaited me in the aftermath of my unmade choice? Would I succumb to the dark, or would the light consume all I had strived to protect? The ever-looming faces of my loved ones wreathed in shadows seemed to sigh, as if awaiting my final decision. I fell into the abyss, suspended between despair and hope, as the last strands of reality unraveled, etching my fate into the tapestry of nightmares. A breath caught in my throat as I gasped and merged with the unseen horrors beneath the skin. The screams echoed and trailed into silence, leaving me teetering on the brink. I was about to learn what lay hidden in the cracks of darkness as the last vestiges of light flickered, a truth far worse than I'd ever imagined. The air thickened, a suffocating weight layering upon my chest. It felt as if the darkness itself was a living entity, pulsing and writhing, caressing my skin with cold tendrils that whispered secrets I dared not hear. I floated in that suspended moment of despair, the echoes of my past churning within me, a tempest of horror that reached far beyond the corporeal realm. The shadows, intricate and menacing, began to envelop my peripheral vision, extending claws of darkness that scraped against my sanity. Each scraping sound morphed into a low growl, resonating from deep within the shadows. A dark creature, awakened by the twisted reflections of my fears. What a macabre jest, to feel both heavy and weightless as time melted. "Do you fear the dark?" A voice reverberated suddenly, slithering through my consciousness like a serpent seeking purchase. It belonged to my twisted self, still lurking within the depths, mocking me with its spectral mirth. That I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the images of that mockery. "I fear what lies within me, what I might become," I shouted, though my words felt inadequate against the weight of the suffocating silence. The chuckling echoes spiraled around me, cruel and relentless. "We are one, remember? You invited me, invited all of this," it taunted, gesturing toward the writhing mass of shadows encroaching upon my fragile form. The pulse of darkness quickened, and with it, shadows flickered like candles beset by the wind. I clenched my eyes shut, pulling back from the edge of the abyss. But even in the darkness behind my eyelids, I could see flickers of light, the flickers of memories both joyful and horrendous. Desperation clawed at my throat, the panic metamorphosing into something visceral, clawing outwards. Then, unexpectedly, the memories shifted. Instead of just escape routes filled with familiar faces, I glimpsed something darker still, a swirling cyclone of anguish and laughter. Faces I had betrayed and lost, each visage twisted and contorted, merging into the shadows, dancing at the edges of my vision. I saw and felt their anguish as though it was inscribed within me. A grotesque symphony played in the undertow of my mind that drowned out even my screams. "Join us," the shadows whispered, and a sudden clarity washed over me like ice water, the realization that I was not merely confronting my inner darkness. I was also awakening something that had lain dormant all along. A hunger deeper than any fear writhed within, eager to claim dominion. In that dreadful instant, the child's cries returned, echoing like a distant memory. Each wail pulsed with the desperation of innocence lost to the shadows I sought to confront. I threw my head back, gasping against the pressure mounting within. Please, I need to save them. You can't take them. Then, the silence shattered once again as a new reverberation erupted from the Pita's singular, piercing shriek that tore at the fabric of the dark room. It wasn't mine. It was a promise of something worse. A proclamation of doom echoing into the depths of my being. With renewed desperation, I felt the ground beneath me quiver. It was more than just fear, it was a gnawing hunger returning from the depths of what I thought I could contain. I couldn't let that shriek belong to anyone else. I opened my eyes wide, the darkness tugging at me within a primal dance, shifting its forms and becoming something unspeakable, yet elegantly alluring. You don't want to save them, it whispered, sliding closer, its voice curling around me like smoke. You wish to join them in becoming one released from the pain of this world. A surge of heat pulsed through me, igniting my muscles to fight back against the darkness. No, you don't get to decide that. My voice came out deeper, more primal, as if I were communing with the darkness itself. I felt the grief and terror yank at my very essence, yet I held on. But the shadows surged in response, fracturing into hundreds of grotesque limbs that reached out for me, clawing, scraping against the barriers of my mind, hungry for my surrender. Before I could process the noise of their piercing laughter, a vision struck me like lightning. The faces from my past faces that lingered like demons behind an unseen veil suddenly leapt from the darkness, their features twisting in melancholic horror. They ever so slowly began to merge, becoming distorted amalgamations of beings I had once known, dear friends and family. Steeped in an ever-deepening loss that I choked back bile, feeling the roughness of dread clawing at my throat. Help me! Save me! The desperation rippled through my limbs, pushing against the encroaching darkness. But at that command, a terrifying laughter erupted around me, the shadows erupting into a cacophony that trapped me between realizations and night terrors. The faces froze, hovering on the brink between relief and despair. My own reflection sneered from the masses. Join us, it repeated, the words blending with the laughter, eternally welcoming me into the fold. The deceitful warmth promising sanctuary against the darkness, but at a terrible cost as they began to dissolve into the shadows. An icy realization swept through my body, a forsaken truth that struck me with unrelenting terror. I was being offered a choice again, one to relinquish all hope, to join in a dance of despair where I would lose myself to the darkness entirely. Just as I reached to claw my way back, the cacophony of childlike wails crescendoed, morphing familiar terrors into a haunting melody. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I felt the malevolence close in, suffocating my spirit as I cried out against the encroach, only to be met with silence. Then, a cold whisper brushed against my ear, chilling my very core. You're too late. The shadows roared in delight, surging toward me, and the faces of my loved ones melted into that depths as the darkness eagerly pulled me downwards, deeper than I had ever gone. In that final moment of resistance, as they reached for me with gnarled fingers, I glimpsed something in the shifting masses filled with endless void, an overwhelming sense of something lurking just beyond sight. I was catapulted into the heart of the darkness. No more choices. No more lightly the inevitable truth waiting in the unseen. And then I felt the darkness that whispered to my soul, you will learn the terrible fate that awaits when you choose to sleep in the dark. The ground buckled beneath me, and I plunged into the abyss, the pain of reality swallowed by shadows unyielding and vast. As the void swallowed me whole, the sensation of falling twisted into a vertiginous spiral. Time lost its meaning, and within that eternal descent, I felt the encroaching darkness expand and breathe around me. The whispers thickened, tantalizing and treacherous, echoing my darkest fears as I plummeted deeper into the abyss. Then, suddenly, the freefall ceased. I tumbled into a realm where shadows writhed and contorted, forming grotesque shapes that danced in the dim light of an unseen source. The air crackled with a pungent odor, mingling rot with the sweetness of decaya, nauseating perfume that clung to my lungs and stifled my breath. Before me stood a desolate landscape, cloaked in an unending twilight. The sky hung heavy with unnatural hues, a fusion of deep purples and hues of sickly green, rendering the world beneath a twisted semblance of reality. Gnarled trees rose like skeletal fingers reaching skyward, their branches clawing at the empty void, and the ground was littered with shards of broken dreams mirrors that reflected images of what once was. I stumbled forward, each step punctuated by an unsettling crunch beneath my feet. The sharp echo of footsteps on the glassy remnants resonated like a tolling bell, amplifying the sense of isolation that crept into the corners of my mind. I was not alone. A low, mournful wail drifted through the air, wrapping around me like a shroud. It ascended and descended with haunting cadence, luring me further into the void. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, intent and hungry for what I dared not ponder. "Where are you?" I called into the enveloping dark, my voice trembling as it reverberated across the spectral landscape. "Show yourself." The wailing intensified, morphing into a chorus of cries that reverberated off the broken mirrors strewn about me. I approached one, bated breath catching in my throat as I gazed into its shattered surface. The reflection that stared back was a grotesque parody of my own hollow eyes, skin stretched taut, a twisted grin that sent chills racing down my spine. I recoiled, but the mirror held me captive, the hunger in its gaze palpable. "Help us," it whispered, each word echoing around me, distorting into an otherworldly crescendo. I could feel their desperation wash over me, clawing at my sanity. The faces of those I loved flickered in and out of the shards-haunted versions of themselves caught between light and shadow, reflection and reality. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and from the depths of the shadows, figures began to take shape, crawling forth from the darkness with an unsettling grace. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if they battled against the very fabric of reality. Each wore a mask of grief, their mouths stretched into exaggerated Shapiza mockery of pleas I could not decipher. Instinctively, I stepped back, my heart thundering against my rib cage. "What do you want from me?" pleaded. As if in response, the shadows shifted, and with them came a cold wind that snaked through my hair, delivering the scent of despair and something far more vile, fear. "Join us," they chorused again, words curling like smoke in the damp air, an invitation and a warning. The cacophony intensified, echoing the sound of 1,000 children laughing and crying at once, their voices weaving in and out, a dissonant symphony that chipped away at my resolve. With mounting dread, I turned to flee, but the darkness enveloped me, tendrils reaching out, wrapping around my limbs with fierce determination. "No!" I screamed, pulling against their grasp, but my voice was swallowed by the cacophony. The figures advanced, each step punctuated by shrieking laughter that reverberated through the fading echoes of the world I once knew. As they closed in, a flash of light erupted in the depths of the nightmare, momentarily illuminating the chaos, revealing a flickering doorway just beyond the throng. Hope ignited within me, but it was immediately smothered by the oppressive darkness consuming the space. Suddenly, I recognized one of the figurisa woman in tatters, eyes sunken and pleading. She was familiar, yet twisted, a memory trapped in torment. "Save us," she cried, extending a ghostly hand toward me. In that instant, an unnerving stillness descended, and the chaos quieted, leaving only her resonating plea echoing through the void. With her desperate gaze fixed upon me, I was torn between the viscous pull of the shadows and the reluctant flicker of hope as her hand drew nearer. My heart hammered in my chest, a raw sensation of urgency washing over me. But just as I was about to reach out, the figures surged forward, overwhelming the space, their cries escalating into a deafening roar. "Join us!" Before it's too late, they screamed, the fabric of reality beginning to unfurl around me. And then it hit me, a gnawing understanding of the dread lurking in the shadows, the depth of the unseen, the truth about the hunger prowling in the dark. Then, as I stood on the precipice, caught between despair and the piercing call of the unknown, The ground opened before me. A bottomless abyss yawned wide, pulsing with a life of its own, inviting me to step forward. I shouted, but my defiance was lost. Just as the figures surged, shadows converging around me, the world erupted into darkness, fraught with the warning, the terrifying truth of what awaited any soul daring to surrender to the night. And in that dreadful moment, as the unseen hand gripped me tightly, the last echo of my scream morphed into an anguished plea for salvation, and then, silence. The darkness closed in, blotting out even the light of hope, as a voice whispered in my ear, sweet as venom, "Welcome home." The horizon before me split open, revealing a void in which no light could penetrate, and I felt the terror of the unseen draw me in, embraced by the depth of what I never understood. I stood in the chilling silence of the void, the air thick with dread. Time ceased to exist as I faced the unfathomable darkness, my heart drumming against the walls of my chest. Shadows twisted and writhed, teasing my sanity, blurring the line between nightmare and reality. It felt as though every tormented soul I had encountered had merged into this singular, suffocating existence, their whispers clawing at my mind with relentless insistence. "Help us," they murmured, echoing hollowly into the abyss. Desperation surged within me. I was on the precipice of something monumental, the truth creeping in through the fibers of my thoughts. All those lost faces, the ghostly figures that had tugged at my consciousness, they were not simply lost to the shadows. They were reflections of my own failures, manifestations of the darkness I had tried so hard to escape. The realization surged through me like a tide, threatening to pull me under. I staggered backward, a twisted reflection of myself fracturing through the web of shadows. The warmth of familiarity twisted into cold certainty. I was never meant to find solace here. This unfurling emptiness, the shadows that awaited my surrender, they were not just remnants of a haunted past. They were whispers of my own making, lurking dangers born out of unfulfilled desires. The darkness had seeped into me like a poison, and I was the architect of my own damnation. I shouted, voice trembling with the fury of revelation. I will not succumb to you. But as my defiance cut through the atmosphere, the shadows laughed, a cacophony of voices melding together in a horrific symphony. "You cannot escape. You are one of us now. You opened the door, and we are your truth." Before I could process the implications, the ground beneath me roared to life, shifting and convulsing as shadows surged forth, writhing eagerly at my feet, yanking at my ankles with serpentine grace. The anguished figures loomed, stretching their hands toward me, their twisted faces a grotesque tableau of despair. "Join us, be free," they coaxed, their voices dripping with an alluring sweetness that felt more like venom than liberation. Desperately, I riveted my gaze toward the flickering door that now stood behind me, its bewitching glow beckoning an escape from this nightmare. Yet with every inch I prepared to take toward it, their cries grew louder, more insistent, punctuated by the realization that the shadows had no intention of letting me go. "Don't you see?" My reflection hissed from the depths, its sinister tone warping beautiful memories into sickening reminders of failure. "They are what you fear most, and you created them." Suddenly, the air thickened, oppressive and unyielding. The figures, now morphing into grotesque parodies of my loved ones, pressed closer, their gnarled expressions carved with sadness and fury, a portrayal of the weight I had borne alone. I felt their bitterness seep into my skin, offering a chilling awareness that shattered my grip on reality. "And oh, no," I cried out, fists clenched, my feet rooted in place as if the earth itself was demanding tribute. But as I struggled against this sheer dread, the voices began to blend again, an amalgamation of chaos, each exclamation a new layer of undoing. "Open your heart to the darkness. Embrace what lies within," they pleaded, weaving in and out of my consciousness like strands of silk. The shadows seized me, an icy grip wrapping tightly around my limbs, pulling me toward a nightmarish tide. A rush of panic lit a fire in my gut as I readied for one final thwart against the encroaching gloom. Reaching deep within, I summoned every ounce of defiance I had left. "This ends now," I bellowed, and the shadows recoiled, momentarily faltering. But it was futile. The world around me crumbled, the ground quaking underfoot as laughter cascaded from the infinite chasm of darkness, a sinister echo of my failures. I stumbled, falling into deeper shadows, swirling tendrils surrounding me, enveloping me entirely. I could feel my essence being pulled into a void, of familiar sensation creeping over me, both suffocating and freeing. "Now you'll understand our bond," they hissed, their unity sending tremors across the ethereal land. I could feel it then, the invisible links weaving tighter, drawing me into an embrace that felt like home, like the cold, dark embrace of fate. Suddenly, I found myself standing before a mirror, its surface slick with malice, reflecting images of myself twisted into grotesque versions that wore my regrets, my desolation, my every fear. And then, a single anguished scream pierced through. It was mine, a raw echo that emptied my heart. With horror, I realized the darkness was not external. It had been a part of me all along. My choices, my struggles, all had birthed it. I turned toward my ominous reflection, eyes locked with the shadow that bore my visage, and it grinned, a triumph cool as ice. "Welcome home," it wheezed, the very words wrapping around my heart like chains. I end that moment of despair and realization. The shadows howled in unison, their cries harmonizing with my heart, drowning it beneath a tide of realization. I was irrevocably entwined with what I had feared, with what I had sought to escape. And then came the chilling truth, whispered in haunting tones. "You will never leave. You open the door and it can never be closed. You are forever bound to the embrace of darkness. You will become the very nightmare you once feared." As the horrific laughter echoed in the dark corners of my mind, I understood with absolute clarity. Not only had I joined them, but I had become a conduit for their eternal torment, an enduring echo of what lies waiting in the dark for all who dare to dream beyond the light. In that chilling moment, a handful of agonizing thoughts resounded in my mind. What have I become? The final flickers of light evaporated as the shadows surged, and my scream dissolved into the never-ending abyss, lost forever in the suffocating darkness. And just as swiftly as I had realized the truth, I now knew this was my eternity. The darkness would follow me beyond every thought, every dream. The unseen horror was not just a figment. It was home. "Now you will learn the terror of forever sleeping in the dark," echoed the Shadowsa's sinister and unyielding promise.